How many of you all have heard of a rapper by the name of Young Dolph? Give me a yes or no if you've heard of Young Dolph. And he's a rapper that died today. So if you haven't heard of him, let me say he's a guy out of Memphis, and he has been on the Breakfast Club and stuff like that. And he was shot, I think, today at some point. I think he was very young, about 36 years old, too young to die, too young to die. And I thought that since we're reading in the book club, we're reading Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson, and we're looking at Black history. I want to kind of start the conversation with something that's relevant to what's happening right now in our community. I want to start off by talking about Young Dolph and this homicide. And believe it or not, this really links to Black history. This links to the control of music and media, the things that are promoted by media, the things that others tend to buy from Black people. And this is important to understand because you have to sort of look at, and I'm going to talk about Young Dolph in a minute, but I want to talk about the context of it all. I mentioned to you guys on the podcast that 200 rappers died this year. Did you all know that? Give me a yes or no in the chat if you knew that 200 hip hop artists have died this year alone, just this year, 200. And you also know that the death of Young Dolph, his unfortunate homicide, occurred right after you had another hip hop tragedy about 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, the Travis Scott concert. Y'all saw at the Travis Scott concert, fans died at the Travis Scott concert. That's going to be very expensive. Lots of lawsuits are being filed. Travis Scott is being blamed, but really Live Nation is probably the one that's most responsible, in my opinion, because they let so many people into that venue. They shouldn't have let that many people into the venue. But let's talk about Young Dolph and kind of put it into context to why would I would even be discussing that as I'm reading from Dr. Anderson's book. And we're going to read from Dr. Anderson's book, Black Labor, White Wealth, in 1 second. But I think you have to really understand how the present is created by the past. Everything that you think is modern and new ain't nothing new under the sun. Everything you think, only exists in the present. The most important thing to understand when you're trying to understand Black history is to understand that you are living Black history. Everything around you was a manifestation, was a creation that was created during Black history. When I did a little thing on my Instagram, a short little video when I was in Denver visiting my daughter this week, and I showed some big, gigantic $100 million, $200 million skyscrapers. And I said, this is the real racism. None of these buildings are owned by Black people. White people own thousands and thousands of buildings that probably cost $100 million or more. Black people probably don't. I don't think Black people own one single $100 million building. Not one. White people own thousands. We don't. I don't even know of one that we own. Maybe there's one somewhere, but I don't know what that is. But and even if there is one, who cares? It's one out of 10,000 or whatever the number is. So here's my point. When you look at what happened with Young Dolph, and you put it in the context of history, I'll start with one interesting fact about Young Dolph. I read his whole bio. He was born in Chicago. I live in Chicago. He was a product of the drug era. Both of his parents had issues with crack. He was raised by his grandmother. Give me a yes or no in the chat if you know a Black person who's ever been addicted to drugs. Give me a yes or no if you know at least one Black person in your family that has struggled with drugs. Give me a yes or no. Yeah. Okay. Somebody said my father. Yeah, my father too. My father too. So why do I bring that up? Well, because a lot of what you're seeing right now, a lot of this death culture being promoted by death music comes from the drug era. It comes from the 1980s when they poured crack cocaine into Black communities, and their goal was to destroy the Black alpha males, to destroy the men that were going to actually lead the community. It was to dismantle families, which they succeeded at. Crack was the only drug that had ever been created that anybody ever knew about that would make a mother not even take care of her child. Mothers were abandoning their babies over this drug. And as a result, you now have a drug culture. You have children who literally we're 2 generations in to the crack era. A lot of the young people now that are rapping and making music now, reflecting on their culture now, are literally grandparents of people that went through the crack era. There was a young man that was the child of a friend that I knew growing up, and he reached out to me because he'd heard of me. And I said, "Hey, brother, how you doing?" He said, "I'm doing good, Dr. Woods. I heard all about you. My mama told me about you." I said, "Yeah, how's your mama doing?" And he said, "Well, I ain't seen my mama. I got raised by my grandmother, right? Again, typical story, right? It's happening everywhere. There's millions and millions of families are like this. This is not normal, by the way, Black people. This is not normal. Children should not be getting taken care of by their grandparents. The children should not be getting raised by grandparents. Grandparents are old, they tired. They ain't there to take over the babies, right? But that's a normal thing for us now. They've shifted your cultural DNA with this stuff that they've done to your people. So he's told me, he said he was a rapper. And I said, really? You're a rapper? Okay. To be honest with you, I meet a lot of rappers. We have an oversupply in the Black community of rappers. They're everywhere, and in my dream, Dr. King had a dream. My dream is that we produce as many entrepreneurs as we produce rappers. If we could produce as many investors as we produce, hip hop artists and basketball players, we would dominate the whole game, right? But somebody marketed the idea of rapping as a way to get out of the trap or to get out of your situation. So, okay, I said, okay, cool. He said, I'd like to send you my music. I said, okay, send me your music. I listened to the music, and within, I think, about the first 3 verses, first thing I heard was, I remember carrying my mother to the hospital when she overdosed. I kid you not. And I this is a true story. And I remember, so that was literally like the 3rd verse in the fucking song. And I said, what the hell kind of nightmare did they put on our people? What is this? This is not normal. It is not normal. And I had to tell this poor kid, I said, first of all of us need therapy. We all do. I said, I recommend some therapy. I said, I did not know this happened with your mama. And it's not normal to be 11 years old and you're rapping, right? To express the pain of having to carry your mother to the hospital after she overdosed. But then also, you remember, this is how you get money. You see, Black trauma is profitable. You see, there are people that truly believe that if you haven't been through a horrifically traumatic experience in your life, then you ain't Black. Just like Joe Biden said, well, you don't vote Democrat. If you ain't stupid enough to vote for me, even though I'm giving you nothing, then you ain't Black. So he in his mind, he thinks being Black means being stupid. And then at the same time, there are people in the music industry that if you ain't been through a complete hell of a childhood, if you had a happy, safe childhood where you didn't get beaten, shot, molested, abandoned, mistreated, or whatever, then you ain't Black. You have so literally, I'm listening to this verse, and he was telling this story about his mother and the drug overdose, partly as just a genuine reflection of the pain he experienced as a child. But there was a part of it that was like, yeah, I'm giving myself cultural authenticity that is necessary to get into the hip hop industry, because I know that you won't believe me if I tell you, hey, I had a happy childhood and I had 2 wonderful parents that raised me and took good care of me. You're going to think I ain't real. Like that, you ain't keeping it real. Remember, Young Dolph, he actually has a song, I think one of his hit songs, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not making fun of the brother at all. I'm not making fun of him. I'm just giving you honest perspective from what I'm seeing. I literally had a song called Rich Slave. I think the song was called Rich Slave, and it was a hit, of course, right? I think he signed his cousin. His cousin's name was Glock something, right? Was named after like a Glock that you shoot. I saw a video that he did that was really showed a lot of talent. The video, I think, was called 100 Shots. 100 Shots. And so here's what I'm saying, and I'm not talking about Young Dolph on any level. I mean, he's young. I'm not in any way criticizing him. Far be it for me to ever critique a man who just went through something that terrible. But what you have with hip hop is you have the monetization of Black death and trauma. You have a death culture. You see, back in the day when Biggie and Pac got killed, that was like a big landmark event in the Black community, because we hadn't really seen that. You had seen rappers have beef. You had seen rappers argue. They settle it, they settle it on a record, or they have a breakdancing competition, whatever the hell they did, in the 80s and 90s and all that. But then it started getting extra real, right? Where Biggie, Pac gets killed, and then Biggie gets killed later. And I'm sure Diddy, I'm sure Dr. Dre, I'm sure Ice Cube, I'm sure Snoop, I'm sure all those guys could probably tell you at least 10 stories where they almost ended up in the cemetery too. Well, that's kind of where it began. And it's not coincidental that all of this death culture began within hip hop right in the middle of the crack era, and right at the same time that Joe Biden and his buddies were passing the Clinton crime bill, right? At the same time they're building all the prisons. They said the perfect people to put in these prisons are these black men who we have defined to be menaces to society and their children. So they built those prisons for you. Those prisons were roach motels that they were going to use for young black children. They saw black children as something, as people that added no value to society, and they wanted to see them fill up the penitentiaries. And they said, let's go poison their music so that they rap about death so much that they will be excited about death. They will be excited about going to prison. And what do you have 20 years later? You got Lil Nas X and his old raggedy ass doing videos where he is in the penitentiary twerking like it's Disney World. That's how sick the culture has become. You go to the Travis Scott concert, which wasn't nothing. I mean, I'm not even into metaphysics and the spiritual stuff. My wife knows a little bit about it. I'm not really into it as much as some of my friends, but they showed me stuff where I said, man, that's a satanic ritual. This dude's doing satanic rituals and people are dying at the concerts. And then I'm listening to music where I'm hearing the same formula every time. It's I get all this ice, all these diamonds, and I got fast cars and fast, whatever, and then sex. Like I got women that'll, do sexual favors for me, right? It's a formula. Pay attention to the formula. In the video, I got the hood in the background because the hood showing you that I'm in the hood really allows white people to feel like I'm authentically representing what they believe to be a genuine black experience, right? So my videos are shot in the hood where it's something real awkward. It'll be like a raggedy corner store in a broken down neighborhood, but they'll have like a brand new Ferrari in the middle of like this war zone that's been abandoned by the Democratic and Republican parties, right? With no support, no financial investment, no opportunity, no nothing. But I'm in the hood representing the Hunger Games or the Squid Games to young black people to say, if you survive the Squid Game, you could be like me. And you can't tell me that modern day hip hop has not become the Squid Games where either you get rich or you die, or you get rich and you die, right? Or you get rich and you die. So you think you're doing good because you got money, but then next thing you know, the feds are knocking at your door like Bobby Shmurda, and you're facing a lot of years in prison. Or you're like the 200 rappers that died this year because you are in the middle of a vibrational energy of death that is so unbelievably, shockingly devastating that death is all around you. Death is all around you. And when death is all around you, death is eventually going to come for that ass. Eventually, the Grim Reaper shows up on your doorstep and suddenly it's game over. So our rappers today, and this goes back, I'm going to start reading from Dr. Anderson's book, Black Labor, White Wealth in a minute, because this all relates to history. Dr. Anderson, Claude Anderson, has come on this platform and talked about why rappers who do the minstrel shows, and I'm not saying Young Dolph is in that category. Again, I'm not here to speak on him because that's not appropriate and not in that way, right? But he said that this is all part of history. This is for many centuries. White people have always rewarded you for entertaining them, right? And if you go to a lot of these concerts, like when you look at that Travis Scott Astro World concert, I didn't see that many black people at the concert. There was one little black boy that died, and he was there with his father, which was very sad for that family. But most of the people at the Astro World concert were white people who are fascinated with genocidal culture that exists within the black community. It's very exciting for them. So when I look at what happened with this brother, makes me very sad. There will probably be another artist that will be dead within the next 2 weeks because hip hop artists are literally dying about once every week or two now. I want to say, wait, scratch that. I'm sorry. If 200 died last year, that's 4 a week. So that's 4 per week. And so the biggest curse in the world is in economics, they have a term called the winner's curse. The winner's curse is when you think you won, but really you lost. You think you're the champion, but really you're the biggest loser, or you're gonna pay a price for your success that is higher than the price you bargained for. To some extent, some would say on the spiritual level that maybe you even made a deal with the devil and you didn't even know it. Well, hip hop is to me a place where you have the winner's curse, where you have a guy like Young Dolph, super talented, super smart, could have done anything with his life. And I listen to when I watch videos, I watch the imagery and I listen to the lyrics. I'm always listening for the formulas in the song. I'm listening for the materialism. I'm listening for the references to irresponsible sexuality in terms of how you view women. I'm listening for the weapons, right? I got Glocks, I got, it got AKs, whatever, right? I'm listening for I'm listening. What else am I listening for? I'm listening for the drugs, right? That's another thing that commercialized hip hop has transformed into. Is it is a consistent marketing campaign to maintain the drug culture that destroyed the lives of so many people in this chat. So many of you right now, give me a yes in the chat if you feel that somebody being hooked on drugs messed your life up. Do you feel like, and I'm gonna raise my hand because my father, my biological father, his name was Boyce. He went to prison for drugs, right? So it's really mind-boggling to me, and it's something that I really want Black people to process for a moment. Is I want you to just kind of think about the fact that so many of you have had your lives ruined by somebody that was hooked on drugs, and yet you quietly sit there and you allow these record labels, these people out here that are buying the toxic music, and the people that are supporting this industry, monetizing Black death to continue the culture that led to your devastation and your trauma. If you've ever had a relative that was hooked on drugs or an alcoholic or any of that stuff, it is a terrible, terrible feeling. And they are doing everything they can to make sure that the young guy who's 22 years old, who could become anything, who could do anything with his life, they get him hooked on drugs as early as possible so he turns into another DMX. They're creating, that's what they're doing. They're not just creating them in a one-off capacity anymore. They're mass producing this because that is part of the formula for oppression. Capitalism and all the ways that they made money off Black people since the beginning of time is manifesting itself within hip hop, because what they've done is they've monetized Black death and monetized Black trauma. Every time you hear an artist on a song, Jay Morrison brought this up today when I was on his Instagram. He said every time they say I'm gonna kill that N word, right? He said, ask yourself how often are they allowed to say I'm gonna kill that Jewish guy, or I'm gonna kill that Asian guy? Are they allowed to say any of that? Or I'm gonna kill that gay dude, right? Are they allowed to say that? No, they take that shit off the radio immediately. They do not market the death of any of those groups of people. They only market your death because your death is profitable, and also because your life does not matter. Don't come to me with that nonsense about Black Lives Mattering, because Black life don't matter to you if you are marketing and monetizing the death of our young people. Seriously, it's ridiculous. It's nonsense. And also, don't come to speak of that Black Lives Matter crap to me, because I'll tell you what, if Young Dolph had been shot by a cop, y'all sons of bitches will be protesting in the street right now. Seriously, I'm not just talking to the white people, I'm talking to Black people too. You would be, if he had been shot by a white police officer, you would be out in the street marching and crying and say, "Oh my God, that wind is going to stop. Oh my God, this is terrible. I can't take it. What am I going to do?" With your drama queen ass, you'd be out there crying and bawling like crazy if he had been shot by a cop. But because he was shot by somebody in your community, you just like, well, man, that's bad. That's sad. Dang. I guess I'm gonna go listen to his music. That's it. There's nothing. Nothing will come out of this. There will be no movement. There will be no stop the violence. There will be nothing. Nothing. I'm telling you, it's Memphis. I follow this stuff. I pay attention. I've been on the Breakfast Club 4 times. So when Young Dolph was on the Breakfast Club, I saw that. I saw what Young Dolph was saying about Yo Gotti, and I said, this is gonna get messy. Because remember, I live in Chicago. They got drill hop, which turns into real death. Real people die from this. This is real. And white media loves the shit out of this. They love it. They love to market it the same way that they made money when they were marketing the Biggie Pac beef that led to Biggie and Pac both being killed. And I thought we learned our lesson. And at the same time, they convinced some of these trifling backward Negroes to dismiss and to hate people like Louis Farrakhan, who is one of the few Black men on this planet that has the capacity to get these rappers to sit down and form a truce and form some sort of way to relate to each other that doesn't involve somebody being dead or somebody's kids growing up without a daddy. He's one of the few men that can pull that off. And they got these Negroes on TV rejecting Farrakhan. You should be embracing the one Black man who has the ability to get the respect to get Gotti and Dolph or whoever's beefing, or the drill hop rappers, to sit down at the table and say, you're not my enemy. You're not my enemy. If I live in Chicago, my enemy is not the guy up the block. My enemy, if I live in Chicago, is all those sons of bitches in downtown and on the north side living in these $100 million facilities with $1 billion budgets that are making money off of our death. that somehow they always have the budget to go build a new wing to the white kids university, or to build some new football or basketball stadium or whatever, but they ain't never got no money left when it's time to go and fix the hood or provide money for black owned businesses that can give jobs to these young guys so they don't all grow up playing the Squid Games of hip hop trying to get ahead. The Squid Games where either you gonna get rich or you gonna die, but you might die broke. Right? So it's the Squid Games. That's literally what they got these rappers doing. You can't, everybody that raps can't go make money. It's not possible. You flooded the market. I meet a new rapper every city I go to. There's too many of them. There ain't enough way. You can't feed every rapper out here. So you're playing the Squid Games. You're jumping into a toxic death culture and trying to outdo the next guy, trying to keep it realer than him. So if he got 2 Glocks, you're gonna pull out an AK. If he got an AK, you're gonna pull out a Uzi. He got an Uzi, you're gonna pull out a Mac 10, right? You're trying to level. He got 20 tattoos, you got 100, right? He got tattoos on his arms and legs, you got tattoos on your face. So you always trying to out gangster all the gangsters. And in China, they have a saying that says, the Chinese have an old saying that says the fattest pig always gets slaughtered. The fattest pig always gets slaughtered. So Tupac, let's go back 20 years. This ain't nothing new. Tupac became the fattest pig. He out-gangstered all the gangsters. He became the most gangster that there was. He out-gangstered the gangsters. He won the Squid Games. And now Tupac did not get the opportunity to live to be an old man because he became the king of the death culture. So I saw Young Dolph's album, and it was called The King of Memphis. And I know that album title alone was going to cause problems because you got other rappers in Memphis. Just so for those of you that don't know, I follow all this. You got Yo Gotti, you got Black Youngster, you got all these guys in Memphis. You have a lot of talent in Memphis. A lot of rappers who say, wait a minute, you ain't the king of nothing. So when that occurs, you naturally get the Squid Games where at some point somebody's life is going to be jeopardized. And so people had tried to take his life before. This time they succeeded. Somebody else's life is going to be taken next. It's never going to stop. And here's the problem. Here's where you stop it. Here's where we challenge this. And then I'm going to move on because I want us to talk about history tonight. But I had to stop and talk about what's happening right now so you can understand what's going on in this world. All this is going to stop when we start challenging the media outlets that are mass promoting Black genocide on the air in a way that they would never do with any other group. You could rap all day on the album about which Black man you're gonna kill next. You can make a whole album saying, if I see you, I'm gonna shoot you. If I see you on bullets on sight. Like you could literally say that in the album. There are rappers who rap that way, who literally say, I'm gonna shoot on sight, right? And there are people, and these albums get 300 million views on YouTube, right? So millions of dollars are made to monetize Black death and Black genocide. So pay attention now. You can say that about a Black man, but you can't even say that about a dog. Like if I see puppies, I'm gonna shoot puppies on sight. I'll shoot your dog. I'll kill you. I'll kill your cat. You can't say that. You can't say that. They'll be all over you. They'll shut you down. They won't allow that on YouTube. They will not allow a video of anybody talking about killing an animal, but they will allow a video of somebody talking about killing a Black man. So that's a problem. That's racism right in your face. That's them telling you that they don't see your life as being valuable. And that's what they're going to do. White people ain't going to stop being white. They're never going to stop being white. I'm just asking Black people to start acting Black. I'm asking you to start acting Black. Acting Black means that you have a standard and you say, no, not us. Not today. Not on our watch. You're not going to disrespect us in that way. You're not going to kill all of our young soldiers like this. This is not appropriate. This is not going to happen. Apple Music. This is not going to happen. Spotify. This is not going to happen. Epic Records. This is not going to happen. Live Nation. You're not going to continue to profit. And if that means we got to even confront a person like a Jay-Z and say, look, Jay, what are you doing to stop this? Then I think that's appropriate. I really think that's appropriate. So we have to change the game in terms of how we respond to these things, because I don't know about y'all, but I'm very sad. This makes me really sad to see this. Every time some young Black man dies, you got to understand there's a lot of people behind that man. There are people that depend on him financially. There are children that look up to him. You know, with Young Dolph, I don't know how many kids he had. I'm sure he had a couple of kids or something, right? He's got his mama. He was getting cookies for his mama or something like that. right? So his family's devastated, right? So this kind of pain is something that I don't think you should have to live with, and it came from the drug era. When I read Young Dolph's biography, it was really sad. He was raised in Chicago. He moved to Memphis when he was two. He had two parents, from what I understand, that struggled with crack, and he was raised by his grandmother. Those stories need to stop. We need to reclaim the black family and just stop, just start calling that out. Not necessarily making people feel bad. You ain't got to make nobody feel bad, but you have to say we have a different cultural standard now because we are keenly aware of all the weapons and tools that are used in a white supremacist system to control and to destroy us. If you don't confront it, then you'll never win this battle. Because I'm tired of seeing these young people die. And I am. It just really bothers me. It makes me really sad. And so I wish Young Dolph and his family the best. I hope that the men in Memphis can sit down, and I hope the leadership, I hope the real men in Memphis can take over and say, this is our community. We're going to have a sit down. We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out how everybody can eat and be successful without anybody threatening the life of other people. Maybe that's not going to work. Maybe that's naive. Maybe it's too far gone. I don't know. But I'm tired of this culture. I'm tired of the dope culture. I'm tired of the whole keeping it real gangster bullshit. There was a guy that I saw. I forgot his name, but he was a notorious gangster, and he went to prison. He got a lot of years in prison, but because he was keeping it real, keeping it hardcore, keeping it gangster, and all this other stuff. And he said I never regretted anything that I did until I saw my 3-year-old daughter cried her eyes out when they took her daddy away, and they had to take me back to my cell. He said that was when I realized that there was more to this than just whatever people had told me in the culture or in the music or whatever. So for young people, I really hope that we will understand that black people need to stay away from drugs in general. We need to have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to drugs. The Chinese used to have a problem where the Chinese, as a country, China was not productive because they had too many people on drugs, too many people smoking opium, and the British were monetizing Chinese drug addiction the same way they monetized black genocide in America. They were monetizing Chinese drug addiction, and there were people in China who stood up and said, "Enough is enough. This is not going to happen in our community." So you know what they started doing? They started killing the British soldiers for selling the drugs. They started giving life sentences or the death penalty to anybody who sold drugs in their community. And then they even started having to kill the addicts. They would even go to the addicts and say, either you walk away from the opium, or we gonna have to deal with you. And sometimes it has to go that far. So I'm tired of the drug culture. I saw this professor at Columbia that was on the Breakfast Club talking about how he likes to mess around with heroin and meth and all that. And he does it recreationally. And somebody said, "Dr. Boyce, do you want to have this guy on your show? I can get him. He can come and do an interview on your podcast." I said, "Why the fuck do I want to interview anybody who wants to promote drugs to young black people? We already have that. Why in the hell?" No disrespect to this guy, but man, keep that shit to yourself. Do you understand what it feels like to be in a family where you had to deal with somebody getting hooked on drugs, where you got somebody that was supposed to protect you that can't protect you now because they chasing after the dope, somebody that was supposed to be a teammate for you in life who's now stealing money from you because they fallen in love with some kind of powder or some kind of pills? Do you know what that feels like? Like, how in the hell? How dare you? What the hell's wrong with you, man? Seriously, and I'm just being honest. I had to be 100% honest. This guy, I think I'm not gonna say his name because I don't want to be. I'm not engaged in cyberbullying. But this guy, I just said no. I'm not interviewing him. Black people don't need more promotion of drugs in our community. How about we promote something that's actually going to allow our children to live? How about we promote things like black empowerment? How about we promote loving black women? Can't that be the new drug? Can't black love become our new drug? How about black excellence? How about we promote reading? How about we promote doing math? Thank you, Tarita. How about we promote things that are going to make us better as opposed to things that are going to ruin us? So I think really the control of black media is extremely important. The control of our own educational system, extremely important. The control of the messaging that goes into the ears of our children, extremely important. We got to take back all of that because I'm gonna tell you, they have weaponized your music to kill you. So anyway, y'all hear me coughing and stuff. That obviously means that I'm talking too much about this. So let me drink some water, and I'm gonna start reading from Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Black Labor, White Wealth. So I'm on page 130 on the book Black Labor, White Wealth, which you can get a copy at powernomics.com. And this talks about white indentured servants, temporary labor only. The dream of living in a world with unlimited free land and economic opportunities appealed to impoverished whites while still living in Europe. Many whites were willing to sell or contract their labor to white landowners for an opportunity to live and work in the New World. For the cost of transportation from Europe, many whites signed indentured servitude contracts. A typical contract lasted for 7 years, but actually it rarely lasted beyond the servant's 21st birthday. Unlike slaves, white servants retained some personal rights, for example, the right to sue, testify in court, etc. At the end of their period of servitude, they received monetary compensation and basic necessities for establishing a homestead and earning a living. Disgruntled indentured servants occasionally renegotiated their contracts in order to receive better provisions, or they simply broke the contracts by fleeing and establishing their own homestead on the frontier land that was available and free to any white person. The instability of the white servant labor force killed the indentured servant system. By the mid 1600s, it became clear that indentured white servants were not meeting the plantation owners' labor and production needs. Moreover, the landowners could not impose complete physical and psychological control over white indentured servants. Therefore, the landowners could not maximize profits. So, a big part of the reason that they historically wanted black people as slaves is because they tried it with white people and it did not work. So to this day, remember, nothing is new under the sun, right? So when you're talking about black people being selected for certain jobs, certain roles in society that really aren't for anybody else, or the way they will look at a black man who is say a rapper, and they'll say, okay, that makes sense to me, a black man rapping about being in the hood or whatever. But then they'll see a black man who's an accountant or an engineer, and they're confused by that. Well, that really goes all the way back to slavery. So even during slavery, they said, okay, let's try some white indentured servants. That didn't work. Then they said, let's try to enslave the Native Americans. Well, that didn't work because Native Americans basically made it clear. They said, if you try to make us slaves, we will hunt you down and we will kill you and we might cut your throat in your sleep. So they said, okay, that's not going to work. So they said, okay, let's go to black people because they were able to control you psychologically and physically in ways that they could not control anybody else. So I'm reading Black Labor, White Wealth. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. As the holidays get closer, I encourage everybody to do a cash mob on Dr. Anderson's website. Buy copies of these books for your relatives. If you got it like that, if you got $100 or a couple hundred you're gonna spend on Christmas gifts, go buy a bunch of copies of these books and give them away to your relatives. You may want to order them now so that they can so you can have them by Christmas time. I really encourage you to do that. That's one of the things I'm going to do. I'm going to give away copies of Powernomics to everybody I can. All right, so they said here, since the landowners had abandoned using captured Indians as slaves, whites found that black slavery, which was flourishing in the Caribbean and South America, was the most viable labor alternative. Furthermore, England had recognized the enormous economic potential of supplying slaves to the plantations. Though England had hoped to keep North America as an English nation, labor demands in the North American colonies persuaded England to organize the Royal African Company in 1672 in order to supply and coordinate her slave trading activities in the world. With the labor question resolved, the expropriation of Indian land to European whites had to occur as quickly as possible. Between 1607 and 1887, European whites acquired nearly every valuable square foot of Indian land via theft, legal discrimination, and occasional purchase, and the violation of more than 371 Indian treaties. The American government's redistribution of Indian land amounted to preferential treatment or affirmative action for white settlers, especially when combined with the government's facilitation of black slavery. So this is how white people got all the wealth. Basically, they had weapons and they just took things from people, right? And so this is something that I think when you're talking about the reparations debate, I really believe that part of this reparations conversation and making this all political has to involve mass education of our community so we can understand where the wealth comes from. Remember, when you're talking about wealth in America, it didn't just happen like that, just magically. When I go through downtown Chicago and I see that every single multi-million-dollar building is owned by white people, that didn't just happen because white people were smarter or that they got lucky. It happened because historically they've pretty much stolen all the wealth from other people, right? So when you go and you look in the hood, and we were talking earlier about the rapper Young Dolph and all the rappers, not just Young Dolph, but really all of them, when they're rapping in the hood, and I want you to look around, I want you to pay attention to how there's so much poverty. I want you to pay attention to how much there's so much devastation. I want you to pay attention to the desperation of the people there. So effectively, all this was created and manufactured. You can even go to cities like Atlanta, and I was running through West Atlanta, and I remember noticing abandoned apartment buildings that looked like nobody should even be living there, but there were people living there. And I also saw abandoned grocery stores that would have able-bodied young black men just sitting on the corner doing nothing. The only people I saw in that area that were making money was the white and Latino construction crew that had come from the suburbs to that area to build an apartment building. And then also the only other area of prosperity I saw was I saw a church that looked beautiful. And I saw a liquor store that was, or like a corner store that was owned by an Arab guy. That's literally what I saw. And this was in Atlanta, right? When you got these black Democrats in there that really aren't doing anything for certain classes of people. All right. So let me keep going. So let me keep reading here. All right. So Black Labor, White Wealth, page 131. They said, moreover, to increase land utilization, some states like North and South Carolina granted free land to white settlers simply for owning slaves. So just by owning slaves, you got free land. In 1663, these states offered 20 acres of land to every white male who owned a black female slave. Such land awards encouraged miscegenation practices between white male and slave owners and black female slaves. So it encouraged the black or the white males to I guess miscegenation. I assume that that's a sexual term. I'm y'all gotta forgive me. It's miscegenation. I do not know the definition of that word. I would Google it, but I'm talking to you all right now. So I must embarrassingly admit that I'm guessing that this has something to do with somebody fucking someone else and making a baby. Excuse my French. All right. You know what? Some of y'all got kids here. So tell your kids, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to use a cuss word. All right. So this practice also increased the slave owners' slave holdings and raised the black female to a higher, more acceptable level over the black male slave. So part of the reason that maybe you see in hip hop where you'll see black men playing the Squid Games or the Hunger Games in order to get that one opportunity to be a rapper or to be a baller, it's because the black male, particularly the heterosexual black male, has been marginalized and pushed to the side of American society. That's why integration is not just a failed policy in general, but integration does not work for the black male because there is no space for a black male, a heterosexual black male, to integrate into this society. If you go to most universities, if you go to most corporations, you won't find very many heterosexual black males. You will find feminized black men or black men, who keep their heads down, right? Who kind of bow, yes or no, so that kind of stuff. But when you talk about black men that really have the kind of bravado, this is why hip hop, I think, is so popular among so many black men, is because that's one space where black men are allowed to still feel masculine, right? Or sports. Sports is popular because sports is that place where you're allowed to be masculine. So let me give an example of a place where I saw this in real life just this week. When I was in Denver, I went to Denver to see my goddaughter, and we were walking to go to a Denver Nuggets basketball game. And on the way to that game, we passed by the Colorado or Denver University, Colorado, or University of Denver. I can't remember. I think it's called University of Denver, but they call it DU, which is really confusing. But anyway, we walked by University of Denver, and they had this picture a line of pictures, like literally about 200 pictures of all their award-winning faculty at this university, right? All their award-winning professors. Now, of course, that got my attention because you guys know I'm a professor. My PhD is in finance. That's my thing. And so I'm looking at the wall, and I told my wife, I said, I bet you that I won't see more out of these 200 people. I bet you I won't see more than one or two black people. And I may not even see any, or if I see a black person, it'll probably be a black woman. Out of those 200 people, I think I saw one black female. I saw 0 black males, not one single black male anywhere. Now, let me finish. There's more to the story. So I'm looking at the university. I see not one single black person. It's like black people just disappear. It's like those movies. You ever notice when white people make these movies about the future and there's no black people at all in the movie? Anybody ever notice that? Like they dream about a future where black people just don't exist. So it was kind of like that, right? So then I go to the Denver Nuggets game, right? So I get to the Nuggets game. Now, of course, I'm watching basketball. And of course, I see lots of black guys now. Right now, I'm seeing tons of black guys out, on the basketball court. They're playing against, I forgot what the team was they're playing against. I can't even remember what. So Nuggets against somebody. I can't remember who it was. That's so weird. But anyway, of course I saw black guys on the basketball court, right? And then the only other time I saw a black person was when they mentioned the entertainer that they were going to bring in for the next game. And you know what it was? It was that entertainer. Anybody ever seen Big Frida? Big Frida. Now I don't know if exactly about who Big Frida is exactly. I don't follow Big Frida, but I think Big Frida it has something to do with transgender something, right? Let me see here. I'm gonna Google it because I should know a little bit more about Big Frida. Big Frida. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. For those of you that are in the Zoom, those of you who are not inside the Zoom, you can actually go to blackkeystogreatness.com. That's blackkeystogreatness.com. You can actually join. Okay, so this is Big Frida. So Big Frida looks like Big Fred. And this was the representation of blackness that I saw. So the only two representations of blackness that I saw, and white people love this. They love black people in this particular state. The only two representations I saw was either the black male athlete and Big Frida. That was it. That was it. Right. So this is the world that you live in. This is the society you live in. Big Frida ain't never gonna hurt a white person. A well-trained athlete is there for entertainment. Right. Maybe next week they're gonna have another black rap. They're playing black hip hop music like all throughout the on the speaker system. But when it comes to integration into other parts of society that don't involve sports and entertainment, there is no room for the black male, particularly the heterosexual masculine black male. This is why it's extremely important that heterosexual black males understand that you're playing a different game from everybody else. You're in a different, everybody else is playing basketball. You need to learn how to play some soccer, man. You got to play a different game, because if you play that whole, like, I'm going to do what white girls do and I'm going to go get an advanced degree at Duke University and get a job at the corporation just like her and go make the money that the white woman is making, you're going to be really upset with your life. You're going to be extremely disappointed and sad because you're not going to get the same opportunities that everybody else is going to get. This world was not built for you. And I'm one of the few people, I guess, that will tell you this, because everybody else wants you to believe the BS false idea that America is this land of freedom and opportunity, when it's just not. It's not a land of freedom. It's not a land of opportunity. It's not a land of equality. All that stuff is garbage. That's all propaganda that is made up to make you feel better and to get you to play the Squid Games. And so next thing you know, you've got an oversupply of black males who become athletes and rappers because they weren't given any other skill to allow them to express their masculine energy. Right. But I can tell you, being an entrepreneur allows me to be as masculine as I want. I got a black wife. I'm a black man. I ain't bowing to nobody. I ain't putting on a dress. I live my life. I do what I want. Well, that's because I didn't try to go and just go to the NFL, the NBA, or get a record deal. I went in a different route. Right. So every black male in America, if you have a son, your son must be trained to be an entrepreneur, and your son must also be trained to build with other black men. Relationship skills, conflict management skills are extremely important for the black male in America, right? So when we were talking about Young Dolph earlier, and RIP to Young Dolph, and I really hope that some of the other artists in Memphis will even hear me when I say this, that when you're in this sort of space, when you're forced to play the Squid Games, when you're in the trap, process this, right? We have a lot of rappers that rap about being in the trap. I think Young Dolph, one of his first hit records was he was featured on a song called something like "You Got to Cut It." Remember that? The price is way too high. You need to cut it, right? Cut it, right? Well, cut cocaine, right? So it's the drug culture, it's the trap culture, right? So we rap about the trap. White people love to pay money to black people to rap about the trap, because you're celebrating the very thing that gives you, that causes you depression, that causes you tremendous amounts of trauma, that causes you lots of anxiety. It's never fun to walk around your city looking over your shoulder constantly, wondering if somebody's going to shoot you in the head that day. That is a terrible feeling. I don't care how gangster you are. Ain't no gangster I ever met who enjoys living in that sort of tension. No one enjoys that, right? So when you think about this trap, you have to be able to sit back and process who built the trap, right? And how they designed the trap, right? And because when you understand the nature of the trap, who designed it, who built it, why they created it in a certain way, you can figure out two things. One, you figure out how to get out of the trap, but then two, you can understand what being in the trap does to you. If you've ever seen animals that were in a trap, in fact, let me give you a real life example. Do you know that term alpha male? That term alpha male. Anybody ever, you're familiar with that term, right? So I want you to process in your mind what you view, what you think about when I say the term alpha male. So give me a yes if you kind of thought about it, like what that means in your mind, what it means to be an alpha male. Okay, and so okay, good, yes, all right. Okay, so the term alpha male is used a lot. It's overused. It's used in the wrong context in many cases, and a lot of times it's used by men who don't even know the first thing about what it means to be an alpha male. Right? They just don't know. They don't understand. But fine. Okay. So but here's the thing: the guy who coined the term alpha male came up with this term after watching how wolves behave in captivity. So he was analyzing the behavior of animals when they are in a trap. So when you're in the trap, the alpha does emerge because you're in this tight, messed up, terrible environment where you're fighting other animals to obtain access to scarce resources. So somebody built a trap, put you in it, and then suddenly it's like being in prison where you have to play by a whole different set of rules and behave in a whole different set of ways than you would if you were in a space of abundance. White people came from the trap. Europeans came from the trap. Europe was the ultimate trap. After the Black Plague, a third of Europe died. There was no food, no stability, no government, no safety, no nothing. So people pretty much became thugs in order to survive. They just literally, that's why they were ahead when it came to weapons. They were ahead in terms of the brutality of how they would kill each other because they were forced to live in the trap like animals trapped in a terrible situation who had to do whatever it took in order to survive. So that's why when they came to Africa, the Africans weren't ready for that because the Africans they were living in a space of abundance. They had plenty of everything, so they were willing to share. The Europeans were kind of like that person who just got out of jail, who's literally hiding pieces of bread in his jacket pocket because he's thinking he might not have no food to eat later on that day, right? So ultimately, white people can build the trap because they really, I believe, honestly, in the very beginning, they came from the trap. And people that come out of the trap kind of see things a little bit different, right? So that term alpha male actually emerged from how he watched how wolves behave when they are in captivity. But what they found was that wolves that are free, that live in a free, happy space where there's plenty of abundance, they don't behave as alphas. They run in packs and they form group-based relationships with one another. There's not this whole idea of one person being the alpha and everybody else submitting to the alpha. That those rules don't apply when you're in a healthy environment, right? So that term alpha male, I want you to just really research that and understand that it's typically used in the wrong context. And the guy who actually coined the term was begging media outlets later on to stop using the term like that, to stop using it as some sort of example of what men want to be. Because the strongest men, the men who are most likely to survive, the men who are most likely to thrive, are not those who dominate and oppress everybody around them. The men most likely to thrive and survive are those who can form healthy relationships with the people in their environment. So when I think about the strong men in the community, I'm not thinking about I'm not thinking about Debo who rides down the street with a wife beater on a bike and beats people up and says, "You got I got $5." No, I got $5. Like that's not a person that you can build a community with. Right? The Debos are the ones that you remove from the community. The strong men in the community are the ones who are representing and protecting a family, who are in a cooperative, healthy situation where they coexist with others, where everyone can thrive. So they're not dominators, they're leaders. Leaders are people who make everybody better. So you compare it to, like, say, LeBron James versus Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was an alpha male, but Michael Jordan was also a big prick. A lot of guys have terrible stories about Michael Jordan. They say playing with him was terrible because he was such a mean guy. LeBron James was more of a leader. LeBron James wasn't there just to get all the points for himself and to give all the glory to himself. He makes everybody on his team better. So that's what makes him into a great leader and a great community builder. There, you can name several people who came up and became very successful because they were in LeBron's orbit. Right. So that's what leadership looks like. It's the ability to form healthy relationships. So I would hope that when you're looking at these environments where you've got this king of the hill thing going on, in Memphis, it's just like Chicago. Memphis is kind of a baby version of Chicago, where you're everybody's playing the Squid Games, where all the rappers are competing with each other to see who can be the king. So Young Dolph comes out with an album called The King of Memphis. Everybody gets mad. Next thing you know, Young Dolph is down, right? Well, I think that we should aim and pay very close attention to the way black men relate to each other. So when you're raising your sons, you got to teach them two things. One, how to start their own business. White man ain't hiring you. White man ain't going to take care of you. He's not here to take care of you. Another man does not take care of another man, typically, if that man don't know you. That's just life. That's just how it is. It sucks, but that's just the reality of it all. Number two, learn how to form healthy relationships with other people so that others will want to cooperate with you and work with you, right? So then you can have a choice. If you run into bad energy, you either know how to get away from it, or you know how to find some way to diffuse it, or you find some way to cooperate so that you can actually build together. Because you start listen. So since we were talking earlier about Young Dolph and hip hop, particularly in the city of Memphis, you have three, at least three super talented young artists. You got more than three, but I'll name the top three that come to mind. You had Young Dolph, you had Yo Gotti, and you had the other brother, Black Youngster, right? All these guys competing, playing the white man squid game, all living in the trap, all trying to be the alpha because alphas emerge from the trap, right? Trap mentality is what creates the alpha. But what if those guys were all working together to better the city of Memphis? What if all those guys sat down with a Louis Farrakhan, who has that Juicy J? That's another one, right? There's a lot of them in Memphis. Memphis has a lot of talent, right? What if you had a Farrakhan that got all these guys together and had a summit, and they were all trained on how to build healthy relationships with each other so they could build together? That's what elevates a community. Is when your strongest men get together and say, you know what, I disagree with you on some stuff, but I really want to get along with you because if we go to war, everybody loses. Everybody loses when we go to war. There are no winners in war. There are no winners in war. There's only the biggest loser. And I'll give you another example. Since we're talking about this gangster stuff, everybody want to be a gangster. Well, there's a guy, there's a white guy. His name's Michael Francese. I think that's his name. He used to be, like a mafia guy. Like he hung out with John Gotti and all these other guys and the crazy Italians and their mafia families. And he told this really interesting story. I listened to it right before I actually came in here because I was taking a nap and I was just kind of checking it out. And he was talking about a time where he ran into a disagreement with John Gotti and another mafia guy. And he said that they were basically fighting over some scarce resources and scarce territory. And I heard the story. I'm not going to tell you the details of the story because it was basically a dispute about money. But what was really fascinating to me, excuse me, was how strategic he was in terms of resolving the issue without it blowing up and becoming something where somebody had to die. He said it was a tough situation. It was very bad. I had to have a conversation with him. I told him I wasn't going to give him this. He wasn't going to give me that. So I went back and I talked to the Godfather, and the Godfather told me that maybe I should try this. So I went back and I tried this and tried that, and then he bought me out, and then everybody was happy. So that logic was beautiful to listen to. It was absolutely beautiful because what you saw was what you're supposed to see from men. And I think, and I believe black men, we have this, right? There are many men in the community who have this, right? But it wasn't one of these like, you disrespected me, now I'm gonna kill you type situation. It was, you know what? Let's figure out how we can resolve this without this becoming a situation where everybody pays a price or a lot of us are either dead or in prison. Let's talk this through. Let's logically think it through in a strategic manner because the end goal is for all of us to walk away from this situation alive. That is how you resolve conflicts. And these are skills that are learned. Even the way he went back to talk to his OG about it to get guidance on how to handle the dispute. These are skills that young black men need to have because if you don't have that, then what you have is you have a whole community with, again, this is what happens when they send all the fathers away and all the gang leaders away to prison. You have a community full of traumatized black men who were raised by mothers who are super hyper emotional, who don't have much guidance, who are just going to get mad, rattle off, pull out a gun and shoot each other at the first sign of a difference of opinion, right? That's what's happening all throughout the industry. And what's also happening is that you have white-owned media that's pouring flames or fuel onto the fire. They're pouring gasoline onto the fire because the more gangster you are, the more publicity they give you, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and it's really terrible to watch, and that's really what's being done to your young people. All right, so let me keep reading more. I'm reading on Black Labor, White Wealth, page 131. Let's read this. This part is Black Labor, the greatest source of white wealth. Before discussing more recent ways that whites have created bridges to wealth and power, it would be beneficial to take one final look at the economic impact that black slavery had and continues to have on economies in America and worldwide. A close examination of financial data reveals why whites have been so adamant about keeping blacks as a permanent underclass of laborers. The world saw blacks as their labor and their labor as sources of wealth, black gold. England was the king of the slave trading nations. Not only was it the dominant slave trader, but was also the primary beneficiary of wealth produced by the slaves in the Americas and the Caribbean islands. As discussed earlier in Chapter 4, The English system was the harshest and undoubtedly the most profitable of the six major slave trading nations. For example, by 1795, Liverpool, England alone had more than 100 ships carrying slaves. This fleet of ships accounted for 50% of Europe's slave trade. Overall, during the 1700s, slave trading revenues expanded England's foreign trade by more than 700%, and annual slave trade revenues averaged nearly $5 million, which in today's numbers would be $50 billion a year. This is the kind of money they were making off of black bodies back then. Slave trading and the related commercial activities were so lucrative that these activities alone elevated England from a poor nation to the single most powerful nation in the world. So don't let anybody ever convince you that slavery did not make white people rich. That's how they got rich. They got rich because of you and your ancestors. So one thing that Dr. Anderson also lists here on page 133 of Black Labor, White Wealth on table 8 is he actually compares, let's see, the slave prices to land and cotton prices. And so I'm looking here, and he says in 1800, the average price of a slave, of a prime slave, was $600. The price of cotton was 15 cents. But then when the price of cotton went up to 29 cents, the price of a slave went up to $1,050. So the price of a slave appears to have been directly connected to the price of cotton for the most part, because cotton was kind of the main export that they were using to make money. By 1860, annual sales of slave-produced cotton generated more than $30 billion for England. Meanwhile, English textile mills were still annually manufacturing increasing levels of cotton goods for retail sales. English trading relationships with American slave plantations were so profitable that England viewed the prospect of an American civil war to free black slaves as a significant threat to its national interests. England was well aware that growth in the English economy and the establishment of its industrial infrastructure was founded upon slave-produced products. In fact, in 1844, England announced in the Report of Foreign Nations that, quote, since 1808, $4 billion of fixed capital has been invested in preparation for cotton goods that were wholly dependent upon slave labor. England was not willing to lose that large financial investment or the steady flow of wealth from black labor without a fight. In an effort to maintain the institution of slavery that had benefited the English nation for more than 2.5 centuries, England offered to intervene in American domestic affairs in order to prolong slavery. In addition, many within England's private business sector contributed financially to pro-slavery organizations in America. So what he's basically saying is that the English wanted slavery to continue. They were willing to help the South because they were making a lot of money from black slaves, and that appears to be the big point that's being made there. So wealth produced in the southern states. The bottom of page 133 in Black Labor, White Wealth. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. Contrary to popular myths, prior to the Civil War, the South was not poverty-stricken, but held the greatest concentration of per capita wealth in the nation. Each of the nearly 5 million slaves represented not only a labor device for income, but also a commodity, a negotiable instrument. Slaves constituted a medium of monetary exchange that could be bartered or accepted as collateral when currency or other valuables were in short supply. So you were kind of like the original Bitcoin or something, right? You were the black coin. So they literally could use slaves to get mortgages. You could use slaves as collateral for loans. You could use slaves as a form of currency. All these things. A white person with a slave never lacked economic opportunity, since his human capital could always be transformed into other forms of wealth if necessary. Ironically, before the invention of the cotton gin, slavery was on the decline. The value of slaves had dropped to an average of $400 to $500 for a prime field hand. At this low market value, some northern slaveholders were setting blacks free in an attempt to cut their losses. More than 30,000 were freed around 1790, but within a decade, prices began to rise and track cotton prices. A half century later, on the eve of the Civil War, a prime slave was typically valued at $1,600 to $1,800. So a lot of you may not have known this, but slavery was about to actually come to an end in the late 18th century, the late 1700s. The cotton gin, the invention of the cotton gin, resurrected slavery because suddenly you were able to make money because your slaves were more productive because of the cotton gin. Land ownership, whites' second great source of wealth, did not surpass slave ownership as the primary form of wealth accumulation until well after the Civil War. The profitability of black slaves as a wealth-producing commodity was so great that anything short of a civil war would have had little, if any, effect on the slavery system.
The $7 billion capital investments in black slaves in 1860 exceeded all other business investments in the North, South, and federal budget combined. So, what this is saying is that basically wealth in America, the foundation of wealth in America, came from two major things: slaves and land. Slaves and land. So if you want to understand the anatomy of America's economic power, you look at slaves and land. So that means that black people, obviously, we're owed reparations because America's multi-trillion-dollar wealth infrastructure is owed to us. And then also, when you talk about the land piece, you got to go back to when millions of acres of land were given away to white people, which is why to this day you've got thousands, if not millions, of white folks out west that have thousands of acres of land. That land has been in their family for many generations. So because you were excluded from the land grabs when the government was giving away free land, that is part of what killed black wealth. Also, because other people were making money from the labor of your ancestors instead of your ancestors making labor for themselves or using their labor for their own benefit, that also created a lot of white wealth. Okay, so give me a yes if that's all making sense to you, if that all adds up. I know we started off talking about the stuff with the rappers and Young Dolph and everything else, but I really wanted to connect that to history so we can understand how we got to where we are right now. All right, so let me keep reading here. I'm on page 134 of the book Black Labor, White Wealth, which you can get a copy at powernomics.com if you want to read it. Land ownership, let's see, hold on, wait. The value of a black slave had a direct correlation to cotton prices. From year to year, as the price of slaves went up or down, so did the price of cotton. Slaves' values dictated the market value of cotton, and cotton set the value of slaves. This direct relationship existed from the latter part of the 17th century to the mid-18th century. Furthermore, the prices and values varied very little from region to region within the country. Slaves were walking credit cards. Any white who owned a slave could always earn money by either selling the slave's labor or selling the slave. Both the slave and his labor carried value. Consequently, non-slave owners were decidedly poorer than those who owned slaves, and since nearly all black slaves were in the South, the nation's wealth was in the South. According to Robert W. Fogel in his book Without Consent of Contract, in 1860, 2 out of 3 males with a $100,000 personal net worth lived in the South and owned slaves. The wealth accumulation of the typical cotton belt farm was 4 times greater than that of the usual northern farmer and was 91 times greater than that of the typical urban common laborer, A comparison of northern and southern farms indicates that wealth was disproportionately skewed to the South. On average, the large southern plantation owners who used the slave gang systems had 18 times more wealth than a northern farmer and nearly 400 times more wealth than the average northern urban laborer. Robert W. Fogel claimed that, quote, a poor southerner who owned nothing more than 2 black slaves had assets comparable to the average northerner with all of his personal property, livestock, modest savings, and real estate. White wealth created through slavery benefited not only the actual plantation owners, but also numerous businesses in the community. Many Southern entrepreneurs acquired wealth by providing support services and goods to slaveholders. Some Southern businesses could survive by providing services and goods ranging from household effects and farm tools to the leather slave restraints sold exclusively to plantations. So not only were you a valuable commodity, but they created a whole industry around your captivation. So it makes me think about hip hop, right? Going back to when we were talking about Young Dolph and all this stuff earlier, and how you've got this toxic death culture with what happened with Travis Scott, what happened with Young Dolph today, what the 200 rappers that died this year. So you got this toxic death culture that is making so many people rich, and they built a whole economy around it. There's a whole economy around Black Death, right? Everybody's making money when there's Black Death. There was a guy I knew who was a cop who talked about how he was a black cop that really wanted to connect to the black community. So he was dealing with that struggle. And one thing he told one of the young brothers was, he said, look, do you understand how much money gets made when I arrest you? He said, when I arrest you, I get paid to go to court. He said, the lawyers get paid, the judges get paid, the court administrators get paid. All these people get paid. So they built an entire economy around black incarceration. And America is driven by money. So when you're looking at things like the Clinton crime bill from 20 years ago that Joe Biden pushed through, you're talking about economics. The economics is what drives all of this. They built these prisons and they said, let's build an economy around incarceration. And so when they build an economy around incarceration, they're not going to lock their kids up, but they needed somebody to be locked up. So they said, let's change the laws and let's lock up black people because we don't like their asses anyway, and we want to eliminate and exterminate them by any means necessary. So ultimately, when you're really thinking about this, you got to think about the economics. The economics kind of drives a lot of what you're seeing to this day. If you take the economics out of the equation, then suddenly hip hop becomes a very different art form. It becomes real art instead of people simply repeating the same gangster, thug, killer, materialist, disrespectful, disrespect women formula. Right? This is not art. This is not art. This is actually just corporate speak. This is a product that is promoted because they know this project is going to make money, right? Even if it means black people dying. That's one, in economics, we refer to that as an externality. An externality is something that a bad side effect or some other community effect that occurs as a result of how you're making your money. Like a company that makes some sort of toxic product may have toxic waste as a commodity, right? So then the question becomes, well, what did you do with your toxic waste? And if they say, well, we just dumped it all in the river, they're going to say that's not appropriate. The Environmental Protection Agency says you can't just dump your toxic waste in the river. Your collateral damage must be dealt with in an appropriate way. Thank you, Tarita. That's a great word to use, collateral damage. Well, for you, though, you're the group of people that doesn't matter. You see, when we use terms like Black Lives Matter, I know for a fact Black lives don't matter to anybody, including black people, because Black lives don't matter, then what happens is that when companies or industries have negative externalities, like Popeye's Chicken is making $5 billion a year, selling poisonous fried chicken that's killing more people than the coronavirus ever could, right? Well, they don't care about the externality of that because they who cares if black people are dying, right? It's not a big deal. But remember, pay attention. If you look at the Travis Scott concert, they took note of that. Why? Well, because in this case, black people weren't dying. You had white people dying, right? Now that white people die, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. These are human beings. Now a couple of black dudes dying in the hood. We could live with that. 85 kids can get shot in Chicago each week, and we don't care about that. But eight college kids, 10 college kids died at a Travis Scott concert. Well, this is getting out of hand. Right? That's why, for example, if I make a song, I can make a song about killing black people all day long. I can literally say in my song, I saw that nigga on the block. As soon as I see you, you're gonna get shot. I'm gonna shoot you on sight, so you better not be out at night. I'm gonna kill your mama, and I'm gonna kill your dog, and I'm gonna kill your whole family tomorrow. Like, I can literally put that in a song, and that song, if the beat is dope, right? Because the producers are talented, they can get you to drink your poison to a beat, right? Then I can like get a Grammy for that, right? I can get 100 million views on YouTube off of that, right? But again, if I talk about harming another group that is seen as more valuable than black people, like white women or gay people or Jewish people, then that song will be taken off the radio and I'll be punished, right? I'll get canceled for that. So this is something you have to pay attention to. All right, so let me keep going. All right, so, and this all goes back to slavery. That's my point. It goes back to the fact that you've always been commodified. There are people that have always created economies around things that are harmful to you. Other externalities, like, for example, there's environmental racism that's emerged now, where they find that whenever they're trying to put up these electrical wires that are giving everybody cancer, well, they always end up in the black neighborhood, right? Or when they're thinking about, what was another one that I saw that was real interesting. They were doing stuff like mold and asbestos and all that stuff. Like now we're not learning like that stuff like does terrible things to you and causes memory loss and all this crazy stuff. I bet you like millions of black kids grew up breathing in mold every day and nobody ever said anything, right? And asbestos and all this other stuff. So a lot of times that might be part of the reason why so many of our young adults have neurological disorders. Is because they grew up breathing things that would be toxic to other people. But again, because they're black, it's not a big deal. Or the lead poisoning in the water. You saw the Howard University students that were complaining about the mold in their dorms, right? So a lot of these things, these externalities, these negative externalities are allowed because you're black and because black life does not matter. You're still 3/5 of a human being, maybe not even that much. So let me keep going. So let's see here on page 135. Black labor, white wealth. Dr. Anderson says farms and small town businesses sustained themselves by buying and selling slave-produced products. Businesses supporting plantations generated massive amounts of capital, which was circulated throughout the communities. The multiplying effect helped establish and sustain southern seaport towns like Charleston, Savannah, Norfolk, and New Orleans. After the slaves were emancipated, those who had founded their livelihood in exploiting free black labor the potential financial consequences. Feared the potential financial consequences. Former plantation owners, merchants, bankers, shippers, clerks, and in fact, the entire Southern community had a vested financial interest in maintaining a large and cheap supply of labor. And this explains why it's very clearly seen and stated that the states that have the most black slaves also have the most black prison inmates. Because basically in America, what they did was they simply said, okay, we've got to find another way to enslave them. So they put that little clause in the 13th Amendment that a lot of you know about that says slavery is illegal unless you've been convicted of a crime. So then they say, okay, let's just change the law and give black people extraordinary sentences for minor crimes so that then we have an excuse to enslave them. And then along comes years later, the Clinton crime bill, where they say, okay, we got this problem. These kids in the hood, we can't control them. We don't know what to do with them. We look at them like animals. And so we also want to make money. So how about we make money cleaning up society? And cleaning up society means the extermination of the black male, right? So they build all these prisons. Joe Biden and his buddies build all these prisons. These prisons are very profitable, and they need to fill them up. So they fill them up with people like you. That's what it is. They built so slavery never really went away. It just kind of kept changing form. And a lot of us don't see that. So this idea of making all this progress is just a false idea. All right, so let me see here. He says Reconstruction failed to provide the former slaves with any measurable economic start. The denial of 40 acres and a mule ensured that these former slaves would never comprise a part of the American ownership class. Moreover, the larger white communities restricted blacks from producing and marketing products that competed with white businesses or farmers. Cultural customs and laws forced the newly emancipated blacks to conform to the historical image of blacks as common laborers. I'm gonna underline some of this because I need to kind of break this part down for you so you can understand exactly how this is identical to the life you're living right now. So let's start with the first part. He says the denial of 40 acres and a mule ensured that these former slaves would never comprise a part of the American ownership class. So let me ask you all a question. So what he's saying here is that you freed the slaves, you laid them off of their job, right? And you put them out. They got fired from their job. So now they don't even have a place to live. They don't even have food to eat, right? And they have no assets. So they're going out into the world with no assets, no skills, no nothing. All right, so let me ask you all a question. How many of you feel like when you entered adulthood, you had no assets at all? You had no financial assets. You didn't own any property. You didn't have any money in your bank account hardly. You didn't own any stock. You didn't own any businesses. How many of you started off with that? Give me a yes if you were in that category. I was in that category too, right? No inheritance, no nothing. Okay. So then what occurs is what happened to our ancestors. So our ancestors were in the same position as you. So in 150 years, ain't nothing changed. Ain't a damn thing changed. It's the same formula, just a new day. And my goal is to change that formula. That's why I'm talking to you guys about the ownership of assets, because it's time to change the damn formula. But it's hard to do that when people have this illusion of inclusion, that because white people are being nicer to me, that somehow I've made progress when I look at what you own and you don't own anything more than what your ancestors own. So here's the other piece of it that's really fascinating. So what did they do with the slaves when they left their job? Now, first of all, Dr. Anderson has talked about black people who actually went back to slavery because they just were like, well, what are we supposed to do, right? So they literally would go back to the plantation and be like, boss, at least you can give me a place to eat and some food, right? So what did they do? Well, a lot of them became sharecroppers, right? Okay, so what does sharecropping involve? Right? Sharecropping involves a scenario where the good white folks, right, your so-called allies, come up to you and they say, you know what? I think black people should be free, and I love you. Black lives matter to me. So I've got some land, and I'm going to loan you, just like they do with these record labels, right? The record labels, that when they give you an advance, that ain't a real advance. That's not real money. That's a loan, right? I'm going to loan you your tools. I'm gonna loan you your land. I'm gonna loan you some resources, right? And I can charge whatever I want. I can tell you, you know what, the land I'm owning you, it's worth, I don't know, in today's dollars, it's worth $1 million. And every shovel is worth $1,000, whatever, right? I can put whatever price on it, right? It's a loan. And then you can work the land and pay me back, right? Right. So what you got to understand is how the game is working right here. What I'm doing is I'm creating a game where I'm naturally going to be the winner. So the slaves, working with the good white folks and the good white allies, would go and get these loans to become sharecroppers, and they would be stuck in a situation where the debt was so high they can never repay it. So they would literally work themselves to death, right? And the only people making money are the people who actually own the land, not the people who got the loans or were renting the land from the slave owner, right? You were so they were still income for the plantation owner. It was just a different game. The game was played in a different way, but same outcome, same outcome. So pay attention now. Here's where I'm going with this. So in that situation, I've just explained to you how, your white friends give you an opportunity by loaning you access to resources, but the debt that they loan you does not match the income that you generate, so you never actually climb your way out of debt. What does that sound like to you in terms of a comparison of what you see today? Give me an example of something that has happened that has become very common to the point of being what's the word that's ubiquitous, right? Meaning that it's everywhere, and very toxic, where they loan you so much money for a commodity, right? And you don't make enough to repay it, so you end up working yourself to death. Student loans. Student loans ain't nothing but modern day sharecropping. A lot of I've mentioned this before. I'll say it real quick again for those who didn't hear. The half of all Black college graduates never repay their student loans. They can never repay them. It's too much. You are $200,000 in debt and you're making $55K a year. I don't know how you're gonna fix that. You have a mortgage without even owning a house. So effectively, and pay attention now, the same way the farmer who did the sharecropping would loan you, give you a loan for the land and and rent the property to you, whatever, where he gets to pick the price where he loans it to you for, right? It's not a fair price, right? Like I could say, well, you can come work for me and I'll give you water for $85 a bottle and you don't have to pay for it now. Just sign here and you'll owe me and you can just pay me $85 when you get it, right? Well, I've overcharged you. So universities do the same thing. They will bring you to a university and like a USC, and you will go and borrow $75,000 a year to go to college. You graduate with a bachelor's degree, a piece of paper that they pulled out of their ass, and you are over $250,000 in debt. And many of these people are in debt for life. They're in debt for life. So effectively, these systems continuously perpetuate themselves. What you're seeing there really is capitalism at its worst. What you're seeing also, again, this is me putting on my finance professor hat to kind of help you understand this game. This game is built where the people who own assets have the power, period. You got to own something. You've got to own something. So when you're talking to your kids about how they want to live their life, a great way to start that conversation is to start with ownership. Don't measure success by how much money you make. I don't care about how much money you make. What do you own? Ladies, you meet a guy and he's bragging about how nice his car is and also what do you own? Do you even own that car? Do you own a house? Do you own an asset that's actually going up in value? Ownership is connected to power and freedom. So stop measuring based on things that don't matter. Two things that don't matter is income. That much anyway. Is income. You're working for somebody, you're making a high income, but you're spending all your money. Then you're just a hamster on a wheel. You're just living like Groundhog Day. You're just living the same life over and over again. You're gonna work yourself into the ground. Number two is these degrees you get. Right now, I have a lot of degrees, so I'm not saying that education is bad or knowledge is bad or wisdom is bad. All these things matter. Education matters. Knowledge matters. Wisdom matters. But you don't always need degrees to have knowledge, education, and wisdom. What you really want are skills at some point that will allow you to achieve the economic goals you set for yourself and your family, and will allow you at some point to own something that you can call yours, right? So you have property, you have stocks you can own, you have businesses you can create. All these skills are essential for Black people in order for you to get ahead, or you're going to catch yourself being a sharecropper. Don't let that happen to your kids. So let me keep going. So I'm at the bottom of page 135 of Black Labor, White Wealth. Those of you who are listening online, if you want to come into the book club meetings, we meet every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. You can enroll at blackkeystogreatness.com. That gives you access to my life class, and that's totally free to the community, because I want everybody and their mama to read Dr. Anderson's books. Also, for those of you that are interested, tomorrow the Black Crypto Club is going to meet. So if you're interested in crypto investing, you can do a free trial at theblackcryptoclub.com. Today's Wednesday. Yeah, they meet Thursday night at 6 o'clock. So you can go to theblackcryptoclub.com if you're interested in crypto and you want to talk to our experts. We have some really good people in there, and I think you'll like what you see. All right, so let me keep going. Although blacks were skilled and well-experienced agricultural planters and livestock breeders, they had no farm tools, livestock, money, or land upon which to earn a living. Doesn't that sound familiar? You have schools like Howard University that produces lots of students that major in business management, but they don't have a business to manage, and they don't have any capital to go build a business. And so when you had, what's the guy, the brother's name? I forgot, the billionaire, John something, or whatever his name was, the brother that paid all the student loans for all the Morehouse students. I thought that was really great. But really, what I would really like to see is for them to form a capital base where those students can then go in and get the capital they need to go start businesses. And also, Robert Smith, thank you. Robert Smith, I'd like to see them also get enough money. I'd like to be able to raise enough money where we can actually build schools to educate our own people. I really believe that one of the solutions to all of this is for Black people to educate Black people. I don't trust anyone else to educate Black children except for Black people who care about the Black community. All right, so let's see here. It says most Blacks in desperation were compelled by white hostility to return to the plantations, either for pitiful wages or as sharecroppers, where they were soon bound to the master's land as firmly as they had been in bondage, said historian Norman Hodges. The northern states also thrived off of Black labor. So this is where you get to your allies, you know, the good white folk up north. He said, as in the South, the northern economy also thrived off the labor of Black people through profits from businesses connected to the slavery industry. And contrary to popular beliefs, most Northerners were not opposed to Black slavery. A few abolitionists opposed slavery on moral grounds, but the greater preponderance of Northerners, directly, if not indirectly, supported slavery by enjoying the fruits of it, by eating the food, wearing the cotton, and drinking the rum that Black labor produced. New England, the home of the Quakers and anti-slavery forces, had 3 times as many textile mills as the entire South. These mills manufactured, processed, retailed, and generally thrived off of slavery-produced cotton. The first cotton mill in the U.S. was built at Beverly, Massachusetts around 1808. By 1817, slaves were annually producing more than 126 million pounds of cotton that had a value of approximately $15 million for processing in northern textile mills alone. Numerous historians, including Stanley Lebergott, E.N. Elliott, and Robert Fogel, documented the high productivity of slaves and the products and wealth they produced for northern as well as southern businesses. By 1850, more than 1,000 cotton factories operated in the United States. Northern mills processed 1/4 of all slave-produced cotton. This cotton provided clothes, fabric, jobs, income, wealth, taxes, and other benefits to populations throughout the North. So while Northern anti-slavery forces opposed slavery on moral grounds, it was apparent from the kinds of businesses that were supporting the Northern economy that nearly every Northerner benefited from slavery. So this hypocrisy, right? This hypocrisy where in one side of your mouth you're saying Black Lives Matter, but in the other side of your mouth you're benefiting from Black death. That's been going on for a very long time. I mean, that's what is this hypocrisy, right? On one hand, they're like, oh, yeah, we're your friends, we're your allies, we care about you. But then they profit when you suffer, right? They profit from slavery, right? So this is true also. You know, we start off talking about Young Dolph and hip hop and everything else. I don't understand how you can tell me Black Lives Matter when I can sit here and I can, in the same sentence, tell you that 85 little children got shot in the hood in Chicago, and you literally do not care. You literally act like I said nothing. You literally act like I didn't just give you the most devastating information in the world. Again, if Young Dolph had been shot by a cop, people would be in the streets protesting right now. If Young Dolph had been killed by a Proud Boy or a Trump supporter, they'd have y'all Negroes going crazy. But because Young Dolph was killed by probably another Black man, let's be real, it's Memphis, it's the hood, and anything's possible, but y'all know what it is, right? You know, people see it in a different light. So let me keep going. Excuse me. I'm going to jump forward just a little bit. Throughout the North, he said, though the North pretended opposition to the roots of slavery, the North drew its very existence from the South in this peculiar institution. The financial benefits of slavery effectively muted the voices of most Northerners. So they were making so much money that they didn't really speak up against slavery. When forced to make a choice between making wealth and making policies to free 5 million lowly Black slaves Whites in the North, like the South, placed a greater value on accumulating wealth and power. Of those who sympathized with black slaves, probably few associated the price of black suffering with the quality of life that whites were privileged to lead as free citizens. Abolitionists and other anti-slavery groups did not relate to the slave products to the production of wealth, consumer products, and life's comforts. Eliot, a writer and lawyer, in his pre-Civil War writings, summed up the moral issue and the ineffectiveness of religious organizations in abolishing slavery. In 1853, he wrote that, quote, religious anti-slavery forces were ineffective because 9/10 of the cotton consumed in the Christian world was produced by black slaves. So this is where, sorry guys, this is where capitalism goes bad. And this is also happening in things like the hip hop music industry. The reason that no one really calls out the BS about how many black people are actually dying from say hip hop music is because there's so much money being made. That's the reason why Apple Music, Spotify, all these other places are never going to speak up about it, right? They'll tell you Black Lives Matter, but then in the same breath, they'll promote a record that is mass marketing the death of black people. And that's because the money's so good, right? So capitalism is kind of a thing you have to be really careful about, because if you're not careful, then the money can make you into a slave and make you do things that are contrary to the values that you claim to have. So let's see. He charged. Let me go back. In 1853, he wrote, and he is Eliot. Let's see, a guy named Eliot. He wrote that religious anti-slavery forces were ineffective because 9/10 of the cotton consumed in the Christian world was produced by black slaves. He charged that all who enjoyed the fruits of black enslavement were co-conspirators. Without black labor, there would have been few products to market or taxes for government. Black people and their labor was first and foremost an economic issue, not a moral issue. This is just as true in the 20th century as it was in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. This is important to understand. So when you're talking about racism, when the Democrats show up and they tell you to get your booty to the polls and go and they get all the sororities and fraternities to go and take their chucks and pearls to go vote for whatever Democratic candidate they put in front of you, you have to help them understand that racism is not a moral issue. This is not about getting white people to like you. This is not about getting white people to do the right thing or for people to feel guilty about whatever the hell their ancestors did. It's an economic issue. You pay us what you owe. You stole something from us. You now want our friendship. You now want us to support you. In order for us to support you, you must pay what you owe. If you do not pay what you owe, then you will not get our support. It's really a basic concept. In all probability, had the anti-slavery forces made ending slavery an economic issue in need of an immediate conclusion, instead of a moral issue that would change as men's hearts changed, slavery would not have lasted for 250 years. As an economic issue, the abolitionists could have directly embargoed or boycotted products produced by slave labor, just as the colonists had boycotted products from England in order to get their freedom during the Revolutionary War. Creative slavery profiteers. During the off seasons, or when a slave owner had more labor force than work, he would rent out slave crews on a mobile basis to surrounding farms. According to several historians, it was quite common to see large slave gangs moving on the roads early in the morning or late in the evenings between plantations or farms. These slave gangs were often rented to other planters or to local factory operators. Fairer-minded slaveholders would even allow slaves to contract out their services in day labor and retain a portion of their earnings. The few slaves fortunate enough to have such masters were often able to save enough money to eventually purchase their own freedom. Other small businessmen earned sizable incomes by auctioning or breeding black slaves. Auctioneers established offices in major slave entry points in seaport towns such as Charleston, Norfolk, and Baltimore. The typical auction fee was a commission of 2.5% of the total sale cost of the slave. If we assume that each of the 5 million slaves was sold at least once, then a 2.5% auctioneer's commission paid on average of the average price of a slave of $1,000 would have produced a billion-dollar industry. After the United States banned slave trade in 1808, the top prices of prime slaves gradually rose as high as $1,800. Slave traders and investors sought alternative ways of meeting the nation's growing demand for slaves. Between 1810 and 1864, a larger commercially profitable domestic slave trading industry was established between the old slave states and the newer states entering the Union. Slave breeding emerged as a profitable industry. So when they couldn't bring slaves into the country, they started making the slaves make babies And that's when you got these breeding farms. So slave breeding emerged as a profitable industry. In 1810, a full one-third of the profits of plantation owners in the older regions of the South resulted from breeding slaves for sale in the interstate slave trade. White males used their power to manipulate the sexuality of black males for economic gain. This is why you have so many rappers rapping about sex and the whole, let's have sex with everything kind of lifestyle, right? This comes, again, from slavery, that whole slave bulk culture. They used to breed them. They used them to breed with their own slaves or lease them out for stud service. Most large plantations had a stable of black slaves to perform stud services, which brought in money from neighboring farms. Every newborn black baby represented hundreds of dollars in capital gain to the slaveholder. Black studs, like prize bulls, brought the top dollar in slave trading. Similarly, black females were advertised and sold for their reproductive potential, especially teenage females. Even older black females had higher value if they had successfully given birth to a child. According to one commentator, quote, a fair price for a healthy 30-year-old Negro woman with a child was one-fourth more than that of a non-breeding woman. So this is what they did to you. This is what they used to control you. This is how your culture came to be. So when you see some of the things that you see happening in media in terms of how the black man is presented or how the black man presents himself to the world, a lot of that comes from slavery. A lot of that comes from a culture where this whole buck stud lifestyle was something that was profitable for the slave master, right? So it's something that it was entrenched. You were rewarded for being the slave buck, right? So that's something that's important to understand, so you can understand why some of us behave the way we do now. So they said blacks and Indians denied access to gold. In the financial sense, black slaves had the Midas touch. Their labor in Virginia's tobacco fields created the first gold rush. Their labor in cotton created the second gold rush in the fields of Texas, the eastern Midwest. As a result of the war with Mexico over Texas and slavery, California was acquired from Mexico through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Almost immediately afterward, in 1849, a natural resource, gold, was discovered in California. This discovery of gold ignited a massive influx of wealth seekers from around the world. Within 4 years of the big discovery, more than $200 million worth of gold had reportedly been extracted. National race-based economic preferences and immigration policies emerged that were adopted in the California gold fields. The two groups who had contributed the most toward the building of the new nation, Indians with their land and blacks with their labor, were systematically excluded from participating in the gold rush. So there's more to talk about. I think this is a good place to stop for tonight. I'm reading Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson. You can get a copy of the book at powernomics.com. That's powernomics.com. So we started off, for those of you that came in and might feel a little bit confused, we started off talking about hip hop and we're talking about the death of Young Dolph. But I think it's important to not just talk about what's happening, it's to talk about how we got to where we are. So that way we know how to move forward, right? So ultimately what you're seeing in the connection here is that black dysfunction, black trauma, black chaos is very, very marketable, right? So when 200 rappers get killed, they don't care. As long as black people are dying, it's not a big deal. It's like that. It reminds me of that Tom Sawyer book. I think it was Tom Sawyer, or the Huckleberry Finn. It's called Huckleberry Finn, where they asked them. They said there was a fire, and they said, "Did anybody die?" And they said, "No, just 2 Negroes died." And they say, "Good. I'm glad nobody died." So to some extent, the black man and the black woman are, for the most part, invisible human beings, right? So when people come to me and they say Black Lives Matter, I say, I don't believe you, right? And even a lot of black people don't think Black Lives Matter, because if we did believe Black Lives Matter, we would actually value black bodies and black lives in a different way. And so ultimately, when I see what's going on with the culture, I think if you want to talk specifically about things like the music, I believe the music was deliberately manipulated, because hip hop music it gives eyes and it ears to the soul. It connects to the actions of young black people. There's nothing more persuasive. There's nothing more persuasive in the lives of young black men than the words of rappers. Yeah, am I right or am I right? Or am I right or am I right? Even sometimes the parents can't get through, right? If you bring a young black boy's favorite rapper to his school, he will do whatever that rapper says. So if that rapper says read more books, he'll read more books. If the rapper says Save your money or invest your money, he'll start investing his money. When you look at some of the economic platforms that are out here where they're doing great work, like people like Earn Your Leisure, well, they're very smart. They went and they wanted to influence and convince Black folks to start investing. Well, what do? They bring rappers onto their show who say, I'm investing now. And they feel that because rappers say that they're investing, that's what people start doing, right? So ultimately, in order for us to regain control of the community, we must regain control of our music. We must regain control of our media. We must regain control of our educational systems. So what's that going to take? It's going to be a 50-year plan. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. I told you guys about Project 2070. This is something that I see, that I visualize. 50 years where we're going to have to build the capital base, and we're also going to have to. Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me shut this down. My computer's making noise. Oh, hold on. Let me turn this off, guys. Sorry. Let me see if this works. Hold on. I have no idea how to turn this off. Hold on. You know what? I think that's my cue to shut up anyway. So let me go ahead and just and say goodbye to you all. So I apologize for this crazy noise in the background. So at the end of the day, control of the music is important. Control of the educational system is extremely important. There we go. It turned off. I don't know why I can't disconnect my phone from my laptop. I got to figure that out. But control of the music is important. Control of the media is important. Control the educational process is extremely important. If we do those things, then we will actually have the ability to implement the culture that we want to see. And the reason I want to give us a couple of generations to do this is because we have to, one, we have to build the capital base. And then two, we have to build up our young people to think in a way that is systematic and strategic, right? So we don't need more soldiers and sheep. We need leaders and lions. We need system builders. We need people that are going to say, okay, you know what? I don't really know if I want to play in the NBA or NFL. I get more excited about forming my own sports league. I don't know if I'm going to go work for that white man. I get more excited about getting together with other Black people and forming a business, right? I don't know if I want to be a consumer all the time. I don't care about having fancy clothes and cars and all that. That's nice, but I'd really rather be a producer of these commodities so that I can sell these things to other people. So if you do that, then I think at the end of the day, you're going to see a better community. Everybody isn't going to win. Everybody isn't going to listen. But a lot of you are listening, and I encourage you to keep on going in that direction. Your children are going to be the chosen children, and your people are going to be the ones that are going to win. So anyway, I got to go, guys. I hope you guys have a great night. By the way, so don't forget that tomorrow the Black Crypto Club meets. So if you're interested, you can go to theblackcryptoclub.com. If you want to get a copy of Dr. Anderson's books, you can go to powernomics.com. That's powernomics.com. I'm out. Have a good night, everybody. Sorry about that noise in the background. I apologize, but I'll see you guys tomorrow. So take care. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.